Hey guys, it's Sarah from Just My Typewriter, and if you've seen some of my videos before, you'll know that my holy grail machine has always been the Barbie electric typewriter. And I was really lucky last year to be able to get my first Barbie typewriter and my second Barbie electric typewriter. Now both of these typewriters came from England, and I actually had my typewriter fairy godmother send them to me. She helped me source these machines, and I have a video on how I ended up with these two machines. I'll link that in the description below. But what's really cool about the Barbie typewriter is that it types in code. So what happened was that Barbie actually wanted to produce an electric toy typewriter for children. So they licensed a design off a Slovenian company called Mahano to actually manufacture these machines in like pinks and purples and colors associated with Barbie. When they licensed that design from the Slovenian company, they actually took the entire mechanics of the inside and put it into their Barbie typewriters. Now Mahano had a cool function on their specific typewriters that would allow children to code and decode messages. By putting in a certain function on the electric keyboard, it would type in code and you could decode it or descramble it at a later time using the decoding function. Barbie decided not to include these instructions in their manual for their electric typewriter because, and I quote, "girls wouldn't want to learn how to code." And so they actually did not put this in the instruction manual when they shipped out their Barbie typewriters in the early 2000s, and what they found was that people would accidentally turn on this coding and decoding function, not know what it was, not know how to turn it off, and they would think that their Barbie typewriters were typing in gibberish because they were typing in a coded function and they didn't know what was happening. I actually found some original Amazon reviews and some Reddit posts about how people got these machines, thought they were typing in gibberish, and then they would throw them out. So that meant that a lot of these typewriters actually ended up in the garbage, which makes them really hard to find these days. Now, after a while, Barbie decided to include these encoding and decoding functions into the instruction manual of the typewriter, and that helped people understand a little bit better what was happening when their typewriter was typing in code. But I do think it's a really interesting comment on culture, on toys, how we treat children, and gender politics, all wrapped up into one very bright pink electric typewriter. So I've reviewed toy typewriters on this channel before, and I'll link that video down below as well. I had a typewriter from the 1960s and a typewriter from the 1970s that were both branded as toy typewriters for children. And I was really impressed with the quality of these machines because they were basically like little portable typewriters with just a few less keys. And I found them to be really active toys for children to play with, really well built, and just very interesting designs. What's different about typewriters made at a later time, specifically in the electronic age, is that typewriters and toys in general were not built to last. So a machine like this, which plugs into the wall, and earlier versions which had a battery pack, were not made to last very long. They don't type super well, they have mechanical pieces on the inside that are electrified, so eventually that'll wear out and it's hard to replace. They're not designed to be drop-proof or anything like that. They're just not built to last. It's kind of part of consumer culture that a kid gets a toy, it lasts as long as they have interest in it, and then it's time to throw it away. Oh my God, that's an electrical cord. Don't pee there. I also think it's a really interesting comment on gender politics in children's toys. I don't want to get political about it, but I do think it's very interesting that by not including the coding because they didn't think girls would be interested in it, in the instructions, they actually created the downfall of their own toy because people didn't know what was happening, they would throw it away, and now in a more STEM-focused or STEAM-focused kind of category for children's toys, that would be a really cool function to have on a new toy that would be really interesting to children. So I think that's also a really cool part of culture, that these machines kind of fall into that crack of here's a time capsule of toys for children at this time, and they're hard to find because people threw them out, and I'm just really excited to have something like this in my collection. It's a little snapshot of some later typewriter history. When I got my first Barbie typewriter, I was so excited, and when I got my second Barbie typewriter, I was ecstatic, and I decided not to type test this second Barbie typewriter until I was on camera for that first video. Now, if you've seen that typewriter video on my Barbie typewriters, I got a Barbie typewriter, this typewriter actually didn't work in the type test, and I was really upset about it because Emma said it was in great condition when she got it. It was a later model. I had a 2004, this one's from 2006. When I tried to sit down and type on it, nothing happened. And I was really upset about it because I felt that I had done something wrong or it got broken in shipping. I was just really worried about it. So I set it off to the side and decided to look at it at a later time. Because the typewriter wasn't advancing the carriage as you would hit the keys, I thought it was a few different things. I thought maybe the mainspring was broken, maybe something in the electrical components wasn't working, or maybe the drawband was broken. And you know my history with drawbands, I was not looking forward to that being the solution to the problem of the typewriter not working. So I set it aside for almost a year because I was vastly intimidated and I really didn't want to break this machine when I opened it up. What I decided to do was finally sit down and open up this machine and see what was wrong with it. And I'm so glad that I did. I started by removing all the screws on this bottom panel, and then I looked at the internal mechanics of this typewriter. Now this actually has a daisy wheel component, much like my IBM Action Writer, and that's a lot different than having like physical keys to go up and hit the platen. It's more of a ring of letters that are electronically controlled to move to the right letter as you type that on the keyboard. I looked at the internal mechanics of this machine and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with it because it wasn't plugged in because I didn't want to electrocute myself. I do not trust myself around outlets. Finally, after consulting the mechanic in my family who said I won't blow up if I plug it in while it's open, I decided to plug in this machine to see what was happening between hitting the keys of the typewriter and then it actually typing. And here's what I found. The first paddle, which connected to the daisy wheel of letters, was actually engaging the letters just fine. But what that should do is trigger a second paddle, which will move the carriage forward and advance it. Are you looking for attention? Okay. What was actually happening was that second paddle was never engaging, and all I had to do was shift it a millimeter for it to actually hit the arm and for it to actually engage with the typewriter. So what must have happened was that while in shipping or while in transit, it just got bumped a little bit and that second paddle box just got moved by a millimeter and that caused the entire machine not to operate properly. So all I had to do was readjust that little paddle box and suddenly the typewriter was working. And I was so happy that it was that easy of a fix. I was able to put it back together and now the machine works perfectly. Here's a quick little type test for you. Hi. Hello. That's right next to my microphone. I wanted to sit down and fix this machine and show you how I fixed this machine for a couple of reasons. First of all, sometimes repairs on typewriters are really complicated, and I've got plenty of videos on complicated repairs on this YouTube channel. But sometimes it's the easiest, simplest little thing that can fix your typewriter. And I wanted to show you that sometimes you just have to look at it and poke one little thing and the whole machine works. And lastly, I may or may not be getting another Barbie typewriter really soon, and I wanted to make sure that both the ones I had already were working before I got another one. I've also tried to look for a few other things to make the Barbie typewriters in my collection last a little bit longer. I've looked into maybe finding some sort of portable case for those typewriters. More on this to come later. I've also tried getting some ribbon replacements for them because both of the ribbons on these machines did not seem to type super well. The one on this one has a little bit more ink to it, but I really want both of my machines to have brand new ribbons in them in order to operate. I did send off the one ribbon cassette to Lucas of Typewriter Typewriter Chicago. That's right, I did it right that time. And he's been experimenting with it for me to see how it works. What we found is it's not actually ribbon, it's more of like a cellophane material that's just kind of shoved into this little ribbon cassette that operates, and we're trying to find a good replacement for it because it's not like a normal electric ribbon cellophane type material inside that cassette. So he's working on that one for me. I also found actually a Mahano ribbon cassette replacement from like the 1990s or early 2000s on eBay. And I went to purchase it because I was really excited about it. But it was about $50 with the price of the cassette itself and shipping, because I think it was coming from like Italy or something. And after I purchased it on eBay, the seller actually messaged me, and I really appreciated this. They told me that because it was so old, they were thinking of the cassette as more of like a collector's item than an actual usable piece of typewriter parts, and they said if I was going to try to use it in a machine, they didn't think it would have enough ink in it because the package itself was opened, and that meant that the ribbon was exposed to air. So they actually refunded my purchase, and I really appreciated their honesty as an eBay seller, and it's always nice to find very honest sellers on online sites like that. Now, one thing I've never done is actually call the number listed on the instruction manual to see if they have any repair advice for these typewriters. So I figured we'd try that today because that's worked for me in the past.
Greetings. You have reached the Insignia Systems customer service line. As of December 31st, Insignia Systems no longer supports or sells the impulse sign system or supplies.
So I actually don't know how these phone numbers work because there's a lot more numbers in them than normal American numbers, but let's just give this a try.
For emergencies, hang up and dial 911.
Maybe I just don't know how international phone numbers work. Let's try the Maheno one instead.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed.
Okay.
Please check the number and dial again. No es posible.
Okay, how do we call international people?
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again. No es posible realizar la llamada tal y como se marcó el número. Favor de verificar el número y márquelo de nuevo.
So that's a little bit of information on what I've been doing with my Barbie typewriters since the last video. I love having these typewriters in my collection. I think there's such an interesting comment on gender, on culture, on toys, on politics, and typewriter history in general. They're really hard to find, and I've met a few other collectors or people out there in the wild who saw my first couple Barbie videos and then dug out their Maheno typewriters to try out that coding and decoding function. It's a really cool conversation piece and a really interesting little piece of typewriter history, and I love having them in my collection, and I can't wait to get another one. More to come. So if you're interested in more typewriter content, I have other videos on this YouTube channel which you can check out, and I have some linked down below that correspond with this video specifically. I also have an Instagram at just.my.typewriter. I want to thank you all so much for watching today and remind you that you're just my typewriter. That dog driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts, puppy.